Namaste and welcome back to the Satya Luminaries. Today, I have with me one of the world's foremost experts on geopolitics and external affairs, Mr. Vivek Katju. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us here.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Just a bit of an introduction of Mr. Katju. Sir is a retired diplomat in IFS and he has even worked as a secretary to the Minister of External Affairs. Sir, I cannot tell you how big of a pleasure it is to be in conversation here. So, shall we begin?
Please do.
Okay, sir. So my first question to you is, how can students like us who aspire to get into diplomacy and international relations actually become an IFS?
Well, the in I think the Indian Foreign Service is part of the civil services of India. As you know, there are many cadres. There are many services like the Indian Administrative Service, the Indian Revenue Services, the Indian Police Service, and the Indian Foreign Service is part of the civil service system in India, and one joins the civil service by competing in an examination which is conducted by the Union Public Service Commission. So, the path to becoming an Indian diplomat is by joining the Foreign Service after successfully going through the UPSC examination. It is a competitive examination, and by now, lakhs of persons appear for this examination. So, I think in many cases, students start preparing for this competitive exam fairly early. And those of you who are interested in diplomacy in foreign affairs should start even while you are in school or certainly once you are in college to start taking an interest in international affairs, and you can do so by reading, by following events as they are taking place in the world, by seeing how India is positioning itself on the global stage. And once you begin that, then your interests will develop, and you will also begin to take an interest in some specialized areas which concern you more. So I think that's the real route to take.
Sure, sir. But sir, is it true that the IFS also takes people who are not who've not done the UPSC but have like external experience? And are there like courses we can do like in universities and colleges that will make us eligible to become a part of IFS without giving UPSC?
Well, not really. There have been some cases of where I believe government is taking lateral entrance, which means that some persons can come into the diplomatic field for a certain period of time, but the real path, the real way to becoming an Indian diplomat is only through the Indian foreign
Yes.
service,
Okay.
and therefore uh, anyone who really wishes to become an Indian diplomat has to become a member of the foreign service. And the foreign service is like any other service in India. Uh, of course, its uh, its functions are very different from those of the domestic services. Uh, but it's a good life. I myself was in the Indian Foreign Service for all my professional career, and I was very happy.
My next question to you would be, with the past couple of years, we've heard a term called Vishwa Guru being thrown in the media as well. We've heard that Modi ji also say that. So, do you think India is actually on the path to become a Vishwa Guru, a global superpower, or is that just a buzzword that's being thrown around?
Now, you use two words, global superpower and Vishwaguru.
Right.
Uh, these are very different things.
Okay.
Uh, who is a guru? A
Teacher.
guru is a teacher.
Yes, sir.
Right? Uh, a guru is someone who deals, who trains, who passes information, knowledge, wisdom, who inculcates values, and that is the task or the job of a guru or a teacher. You have teachers in your school who do this for you in different fields. Uh, now, Vishwaguru is something that was used. I find now that the term being used more often is Vishwabandhu.
Okay.
I have the next term that you used is a global superpower.
Yeah.
Now, foreign relations, foreign relations are, and it is here that you have to gain an understanding. The international community, the countries of the world, technically in diplomacy, they are called states. You have states in India. Let's not confuse between the two. Indian states are states part of the Union of India. But countries in international terms are called states. Now, the international system still is a system of relationships between different states or between different countries. This relationship is based essentially on interest. Every country has interests. Now, what does the word interest mean? Interest means that you have concerns, you have aspirations to get something. There can be economic interests, commercial interests. These are interests in trade. You want your exports to grow. You want that there should be greater Indian investments abroad, or a country may wish to have greater investments. Uh, that will bring about prosperity within the country. Similarly, you have interests which are related to security, because the primary task of any country and the government of any country is to ensure the security of its citizens and the security of its territory. Right? There are other countries who might have ill intentions, who might want to grab your territory. So you've got to have an army, you've got to have defense services, defense forces. Now, when you talk of a global superpower or any country which is a power, it has these capacities, has the capacity to not only defend itself, but it has the capacity to project its power. One is a defensive thing that I can defend myself.
Yes, sir.
The other is that I can go and I can, I have the means to project my power. Now, the word project means that I can show my power in a different area of the world or in my own region. So, a superpower is a power or a country which is protects its interests, defending, but it is also protecting its interests by moving out. Like you take the Americans, are the world's preeminent countries. They are the world. It's a fact. Can't be denied that they have the greatest capacity to project their power. They have their army, their navies, uh, their air power is such that if they wish to project their power, they have that ability. The Chinese are competing with them. That is why you find today there's competition in the world. So, Guru is concerned with value. That here you are telling people you should be peaceful, you should be respectful of others. Uh, but power is something else. So that is why I thought I must distinguish for you that power is something and a guru or teaching is something else.
They're different things. I understand, sir. Okay. Sir, my next question to you would be that given you such a long time in this industry, what do you think will be the future of diplomacy in the next couple of decades? How do you think it will change? And is there a growing scope for business and entrepreneurial diplomacy? Is that something that's going to grow a lot?
Diplomacy is not industry. You use the word industry. So first of all, be clear, it's not industry.
Right.
Diplomacy is a profession. And the purpose of a diplomat is to try to reconcile interests. Just as countries have armies which are there to protect its security, it has diplomats who perform the function of protecting its interests through a process of negotiations with other countries. And if there are differences between them, then to try to find a way whereby those differences can be addressed or can be settled.
Understood, sir.
Now, sometimes it's possible to do so, at other times it is not possible to do so because but that is the purpose of diplomacy. Now, as long as I believe, as long as there are states, and I don't see that the international community will be moving away from being essentially uh, a community of states, of countries. And there will have to be diplomats of belonging to these countries who will be interacting with each other to try to, as I said, reconcile different positions that they may have. We see that in our own country. Uh, you have diplomats, you have a problem, let's say, is with your neighbors, with any of your neighbors on any issue. So diplomats come in along with specialized persons who have specific knowledge, because there are, say, if it's a river water sharing problem, you have rivers which flow through different countries. So there can be differences between countries on the sharing of these waters. So diplomats take the advice of the specialists in hydrology, And then they then try to meet their counterparts to find a way out so that there is no conflict. Conflict is avoided. So as long as there are countries, there is an international community based on states, there will be diplomats representing.
Understood. Swasti, you want to ask something?
So, sir, my question to you is that what are your opinions on soft power and how do you think India can use it for its advantage?
Soft power is a term that is used to influence other peoples and other countries, basically people, through certain characteristics or certain institutions that you have. Right. And the other country gets attracted to these institutions, the other country gets forms a favorable opinion. Now, for instance, we have soft power elements which are derived from our traditions. Yoga is one. That is an attribute of India's soft power because yoga is popular in the world and everyone knows yoga emerged from India. Gandhiji's non-violence is another element of our soft power. We
Yes.
don't often talk about it, but the United Nations celebrates a day of non-violence. So that was a very powerful message when Gandhiji uh, essentially uh, told people of the world, and that is the message that he taught us Indians when we were struggling for our independence against the British. That the way to achieve your objectives need not be through violence. That the correct way is non-violent. And it is this uh, principles of Gandhiji which inspired millions of people all across the world. In America, you would have heard of Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King started the civil rights movement in America. I don't know if you people have focused on this, but despite all their claims, America was a society which was very unfair to the blacks. As recently as, say, the 1950s, they practiced a policy of segregation. That means that they have different schools for white people and different schools for black people. They had in a restaurant, black people had a different section where they could only sit. There were different, you would be surprised that there were even different bathrooms. Bathroom meant for whites and bathroom meant for blacks, even though the American Constitution says that all people are created equal. But the American Supreme Court, sometime in the 1890s, had developed this doctrine which was separate but equal. Now, it was a bogus doctrine. If you separate people, then obviously they're not equal. So there was a civil rights movement which began in the 1950s, and they faced terrible time, and Martin Luther King was who was later assassinated, was its leader. And what did he say? He told his people that the path we must follow for getting equality is non-violence. The other person who was influenced, who was also one of the greatest persons of the 20th century, was Nelson Mandela. Because in South Africa there was apartheid, which was even a more vicious system than the separation in America. So these are the people who were attracted to non Gandhiji's philosophy his principles of non-violence and followed it. And so it's a very powerful tool of soft power. To my mind, the third, and which I think is the most powerful thing today, is India's democracy. You see how political change is taking place in the world through violence. In India, on the other hand, uh, and please remember, we are the world's most populous country. 1/6 of humanity is Indian. Have you ever thought that out of every 6 persons in this world, one is an Indian? And in this huge country of ours, we are able, through our constitution and its institutions, we are able to resolve our differences through constitutional means and elect our governments through the will of the people. So that is, to my mind, a very, very powerful instrument of our soft power. As a young diplomat, when I served in different countries, people used to tell me in this, sometimes with amazement, that how are you able to achieve that? Elections are held, one party wins, the other party loses, the party that loses just goes and gives up power. They don't try to stick to it. They don't take to guns. They give up power. So that is another element of our soft power. So I think soft power is important. But at the end of the day, my experience is that what matters is the actual hard power.
Right. Yes.
And the elements of hard power are not only in terms of military forces. That is an element, of course. It's a very important element. But it's also how innovative you are. How much progress have you made in science and technology? In pure science and technology, where are you in these terms, not only in its applications, but are you at the frontier or the cutting edge of science and technology? In commerce, in industry, in finance. So those are the elements of hard power. And soft power is in addition to influence people, and it's very important too.
Right. Yes. So, but my question to you is, with ongoing conflicts in regions like Gaza, Ukraine, and Sudan, many argue that diplomacy often fails to resolve or solve the conflicts. So, does this show an ineffectiveness of the UN, or is it a deeper flaw in the structure of how democracy is conducted or diplomacy is conducted?
Look, as I told you, all countries behave and conduct themselves in accordance with their interests. Right? Diplomats try to resolve issues through negotiations. Negotiations is a process of give and take.
Yes.
Right? Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yes.
On some issues, some countries feel that they will not negotiate. Now, if they don't negotiate, then what is the alternative? The alternative is the use of force. Hmm? Now, the UN, and the United Nations, since you mentioned it, the United Nations is a forum where all countries try to reconcile their differences. But the United Nations too, and we say it often, is outmoded.
Yes.
The United Nations came into existence in 1945.
Right.
And it came into existence after the Second World War. Now, in the United Nations, as you know, and since you people will take part in mock United Nations, you know there are different organs of the United Nations.
Yes, sir.
The organ that is responsible for peace and security is the Security Council.
Yes, sir.
Now, the Security Council has 15 members, 5 of whom are permanent. And who are these 5 permanent members? You know, originally they were the United States, the Soviet Union, China, Britain, and France.
Yes, sir.
Now, these countries were the victors of the Second World War.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So, in the Security Council, they said that not only will we be permanent, we will also have a veto.
Yes, sir.
What is the purpose of the veto? It is to protect the interests of that particular country.
Yes, sir.
So these are 5 permanent veto holding members. Now, in the last, what? Now, almost 80 years, because in 2025, which is only a few weeks from now, the United Nations will turn 80 next year. In these 80 years, the world has changed completely. The power which was there with the Soviet Union, of course, has gone, and now in its place is Russia as successor state. But the power differential which was there earlier is no longer there. The world never sits, is never still. It is never unchanging. It changes all the time. Sometimes the change is fast and you can see it. Sometimes the change is slow and it manifests itself only later. But certainly, while the United States is the world's most important country still, the relative power of Britain and France has come down. There is the European Union that has come into place. China, which was relatively weak, is now challenging the United States, has become a major power. Russia's power has come down. India's power has grown. Brazil's power has grown. There's South Africa, Germany, Japan. So, the United Nations Security Council, which is responsible for international peace and security, is unable to deliver this, largely because it is totally outmoded. The United Nations is not a world government. I think that is something that you must understand. A government, for example, the government in India, under the constitution, has certain powers. And it has the power to enforce its decisions. The United Nations also, on some issues, comes together and under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter is able to say that all members of the United Nations will agree to this. But that is very seldom. In the Ukraine war, who are the parties? Russia, which is itself a permanent member of the United Nations, holding this veto. So will it ever agree to a decision taken by the United Nations
Never.
Security Council? No. Right? Similarly, between Israel and, say, in Gaza, Israel is an ally of the United States and the United States uses its veto, uses its other instruments to protect Israel in the United Nations. Right? So the point I'm trying to make is that please understand that the United Nations works in a certain format. It is not a world government. There's no such thing as a world government.
Yes.
So, but do you think there are any reforms that can be made to the UN framework as such to make it more relevant?
Yes, it should be first of all made more contemporary. That is what India has been saying for a long time, that India should be a permanent member of the United Nations. And correctly, why? Our power has grown.
Yes.
Definitely.
We are no longer the country that we were soon after independence. When, during the British period, India was thoroughly exploited. We were a colony of the British. So it took time for us to organize ourselves to become uh, stronger economically, stronger commercially, uh, make our armed forces, our defense forces more powerful, make strides in science and technology. Now, why do I mention science and technology? I mention that because I'm sure that you people have studied the history. In your history lessons, you have studied colonialism.
Yes, sir.
You have. Now, why was it that European countries uh, succeeded in defeating uh, countries in Asia, in Africa, in South America, and established them as colonies? It was because the Industrial Revolution took place there.
Yes.
And the Industrial Revolution was based on advances in science. And then that scientific knowledge was translated into technological knowledge. So they applied that technological knowledge to their armies. So their armies were able to defeat the armies of other countries, etc., and establish colonies. So what is the lesson? The lesson is that if in knowledge a society becomes weak, then that society gets dominated. That is why, if you study uh, the first Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, what was his focus? He may have made many mistakes, but his focus was that India must come into the forefront of science and technology.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
And that is why he took special interest in establishing institutions like the IITs, like other scientific Indian Institute of Science, and upgrading our medical facilities, etc. Because he had this passion that if we are not in the forefront of science and technology, we will fall back. And now, of course, that was in the analog age. You children are now living in the digital age, and the digital age has just begun. I can't speak much about it because I find that the young people know far more about the digital age than person like me does. I've become old. But what I do understand is this, that in this digital age, countries that are in the forefront and our scientific and technological powers will be the leading countries of the world. For example, I'll just give you one more thing. This is something that all of you can think about. What is the whole basis? From what I've read, again, young people like you know more than about this than persons like me. But what I've read is that the basis of all digitization, including artificial intelligence, and artificial intelligence is making such rapid strides, you know it, is mathematics, isn't it? It's algorithms. And who produces algorithms? Mathematicians. So what does India need today?
Mathematicians.
Mathematicians. What are the Chinese doing? If you see, they are producing mathematicians uh, in numbers that are mind-boggling, because they are realizing that this is the path, this is necessary, because the basis of all artificial intelligence is if it is algorithm. And of course, hardware has to be produced, but even for that purpose, you need algorithms.
Right.
You need mathematicians with expertise in these areas. Just as at one time you needed engineers. So that is, I think, what is very important.
Right. So, sir, my next question to you is regarding the current stance of US, wherein two businessmen, Elon Musk and Donald Trump, are leading the country. So, sir, according to you, will it lead to the betterment of the country or malign its path?
Well, the Americans have re-elected for the second time Donald Trump
Right.
uh, as president. Donald Trump has very different views of the world than conventional political leaders. Elon Musk is his supporter. He does not have the mandate of the people of America. Donald Trump does. And this time his victory was more astonishing because he not only won the electoral college, you know, the American presidential elections have a strange system. Uh, Sometimes there can be a president who wins the electoral college, but it does not win the majority in the country.
Yes, sir.
But this time Donald Trump has both a majority as well as his victory in the electoral college over Kamala Harris. So he has the mandate of the people, but America is a divided country, polarized country. Uh, we just have to wait and watch and see what are the kinds of attitudes he takes on issues which confront humanity and which are important for the existence of humankind and human civilization as we know it. For example, to my mind, the most important challenge that the world faces is that of climate change.
Yes, sir.
You are young people, you cannot, you do not know what was the kind of weather that a person like me experienced, say, 60, 70 years ago when I was a young child. It was very different. Even in my these 70 odd years that I've spent, I've seen climate change. Climate change is a fact. Donald Trump believes it's a hoax. Uh, Global warm and climate change, we know, is because of global warming, because of the emission of greenhouse gases. For that, lifestyle changes are important, and those changes are painful. But more equally importantly, societies have to move to clean energy. Uh, uh, Last time around, when he was president between 2016 and 2020, he pulled America out of the Paris Accords. We just have to wait and watch him. what he does again. Similarly, on other issues, Donald Trump does not believe that there needs to be, uh, or there is a responsibility on America, which is special because of the fact that it is the most powerful country in the world. He has, what was his slogan, MAGA, Make America Great Again, etc., which is that American interests. And he's been making some comments, even as president elect, which are very interesting. So we really have to wait and watch and see the way he performs, because why I'm stressing this is that he will hold the most powerful political office in the world, and therefore he will influence world events. And if there's greater balance in the way he handles them, it will be beneficial for everyone. If he doesn't, then there'll be difficulties.
Understood, sir. So my next question to you is also regarding current affairs. That a couple of days ago in Syria, we saw that the president and the regime was overthrown. Assad fled to Russia. So what do you think is going to happen next? Is Syria heading towards a democratic regime, or is it going to be more of the same military leadership?
Um, I am at the moment fairly pessimistic about Syria's future. The the rebel group HTS that has captured Damascus, and its leader Jolani claim that they have transformed themselves, and that they, while they believe in the Islamic Sharia, they are not going to be like the Al Qaeda or the ISIS. But their roots are in Al Qaeda and ISIS. In addition, there are different countries which have different interests in Syria. For example, Syria has a fairly large Kurdish population, and there are Kurds in Iraq, in Syria, and in Turkey. And some of these Kurds want an independent Turkish Kurdistan, but Turkey is completely opposed to it. So Turkey intervenes in Syria's affairs. Similarly, we'll have to see what the Russians and the Iranians, who have suffered a reverse because they were supporting Assad, and Assad's forces just fell, they crumbled, gave up without a fight. So, what will they do now? They try to regroup. If so, how will they do it? Whom will they do it? Similarly, there are other groups like the Syrian National Army. How will they act? So I think uh, it's going to be difficult to put all these pieces back again for so that Syria again starts functioning as a united country within its territories. We'll just have to wait and watch. Quite frankly, it's very difficult to make predictions of what's going to happen on Syria.
Understood, sir. Thank you.
So I was quite curious about the terrorism management. Reflecting on the IC 814 hijacking incident, how did that experience shape your understanding on terrorism management? And does India negotiate with terrorists?
terrorism is a phenomena where the terrorists, through the use of indiscriminate force against individuals, seek to achieve their political objectives. So they'll hijack a plane, they'll kidnap people, innocent persons, and through that, they'll try to put pressure on the government. Now, it's not easy for any government to handle such situations because, on the one hand, the government, no government likes to deal with with a group that is holding persons in its as hostages and is seeking political advantage. On the other hand, governments have an obligation to protect the lives of their citizens. So governments then try to manage the situation as best as they can. You have seen the situation that is, and you mentioned the Israel's action in Gaza, and you saw what happened. Hamas came in, killed 1,200 Israelis on October 7th, and took about 240 odd Israelis and citizens of other countries as hostages and took them to Gaza. Now, the Israelis and other countries have tried to negotiate, also use force. So, with terrorists, it's dealing with terrorists for any government. There has to be a combination both of use of force and of negotiations. Sometimes the use of force becomes impossible without it being without it threatening the life of the hostages. Sometimes it's possible. So there are no clean and simple ways of handling these things.
Yes.
There are always dilemmas which governments face, uh, and not only governments. It also depends on the attitudes, the social attitudes, the approaches of a particular country and its people when such incidents take place on how to deal with terrorists. Of course, the use of force is necessary, just as sometimes, if terrorists are acting, then the armed forces have to act to protect the people and to combat the terrorists.
Right. So, sir, in moments like Kargil and IC-814, how do you deal with the moral and emotional dilemmas of diplomacy, where decisions often involve trade-offs between national security and even human lives? So, how do you deal with those?
How do you balance that aspect? What is more important?
Um, I think it's not difficult. The balancing act. There are rules of war, and armies and countries follow rules of war. We do. Uh, so, if in Kargil you are attacked, your territory is being taken, then the government took a decision that it will ensure that India's territorial integrity is protected. the Indian Army paid a very heavy price, but the Indian Army consists of officers and men whose courage, whose bravery, skills, whose nationalism, their commitment and dedication to the nation is exemplary. So they acted in a manner that was required of them, and they threw out the Pakistani intruders, and they defeated Pakistan. Operation Vijay was a success.
Yeah.
Pakistan had to vacate territory. Uh, Now, in such situations, there are no moral dilemmas. Uh, you have set rules and you follow those rules. India is also a country which has always, and that is a constitutional value, which is always tried to ensure the protection of fundamental rights of its people and act in accordance with international law when it acts abroad. So, to my mind, there are no dilemmas here. The dilemma comes when a government has to decide if, in using force, it will jeopardize the life of innocent people.
Collateral damage.
Then it has to take a difficult decision.
Understood, sir. Sir, along these same lines, in the specific case of the Indian Airlines hijacking, where our plane was taken to Kandahar and a lot of people were stuck in there, at that point in time, when the country eventually relented to releasing some terrorists in exchange for bringing our people back, sir, does that put you in a situation where you have to do a bit of maths in the sense that if these terrorists are let out, does that harm us further? What will happen? The future damage they'll cause. So how do you then understand that aspect of it? That today these are 100 people and that will gain their freedom back, but down the line maybe these three terrorists will combine to do damage of thousands, tens of thousands.
Uh, these are the dilemmas which I was talking about, which political leaders face, because at the end of the day, uh, when it comes to trade-offs
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
between the present and the future, it is the government, the political leadership that takes a decision. Now, when the political leadership takes these decisions, it has to take into account the thinking of the vast majority of its people. Some countries are more stoic. If there is a hostage situation
Right.
and there is a danger that if the government takes action, people will die, innocents will die. Then my experience is that in some countries, there is the will, and the government of that country knows that it will be able to stand up before the people and say uh, that this action was necessary. We are very sorry that people died, and we have grief. We share the grief of the people, but it was necessary for the national interest.
Okay, sir.
Other governments don't have that how should I say that certainty.
Right.
So it depends between country, and these are dilemmas which all countries face. all countries try to navigate their way through such dilemmas.
Yes, sir. So my next question to you is that looking at the current global scenario, do you think history will repeat itself, and do you think we will face World War III?
I don't see World War III happening because World War III would mean the end of humankind. I think there's enough wisdom in the world to not to come to that situation. But the world is certainly becoming a dangerous place, a more dangerous place, uh, and conflicts will come, and there'll be deadly conflicts. What I'm more worried about is the impact that rising populations in the world, because when COVID began, then I did some reading and I realized that at that time when COVID began, the population of the world was 180 crores. Today, let me ask you this: what is the population of the world? Do you people know this?
Yes, yes.
273, I suppose.
Swasti, say it. What's your number?
73, I suppose.
Pardon?
273.
No, the population of the world. I'm asking in 1920, 1918, 1920, the population of the world was about 1.8 billion. That is why I said it was about 180 crores.
Yes, sir. So today, I think it's about 7.5 billion.
You're right, you're approximately right. It's I think crossed 8 billion. So the population of the world is 800 crores. Now, resources are, of course, technological change has taken place, and therefore we are able to exploit resources, etc. Uh, but if climate change is not halted, then there is going to be, that will be a portent of great destabilization. And I dare say children are what? You are around 17, 18
Yes, sir.
years old.
Yes,
Am I
sir.
right?
Yes, sir.
Huh?
Yes, sir.
You're 17. And you young ladies are what? The same age?
14.
14.
Yes.
So you will be seeing enormous changes in your lifetime. And climate change will make a big impact. That is why, to my mind, the most important crisis that is facing the world today is combating climate change. And I don't see enough will in the advanced countries to really contribute fully and cooperate fully with the developing countries to manage climate change.
Understood, sir. So, I have one last question for you. Over the years, around our neighboring countries in our general proximity, we've really tried to help nations build their economies, strengthen themselves, protect their sovereignty. We look at Sri Lanka and their civil war, we try to help there, we help Bangladesh in their independence struggles. But, sir, today we are at a point in time where we are surrounded by not many friendly nations or not very diplomatic governments. So, sir, why has that happened?
Look, you're very young people, and I don't want to disillusion you, but I must speak facts.
Definitely, sir.
And even if you're 14 and you are 17, you must understand facts. Friendship is among individuals. Friendship is among people. You are a you have a friend and you'll do anything for your friend, and he'll do anything for you. Friendship is also among family members. So very often in families too, as as children get older, as family members get older, there is conflict, isn't there?
Yes, sir.
We know that on property matters, for example, in families, there are legal cases. So why does this take place? Because as people get older, their interests start differing. One brother's, if supposing there's one property and a brother is living in it, it belongs to two brothers. One brother is living in it. His interest is to continue living in it, to maintain it. I'm giving you this as an example. His interest is that his family continues enjoying that property, living in it, and it's comfortable for him. On the other hand, if the other brother does not live in it, he wants that his that the property be sold and that he gets whatever his money, whatever is his share of that property, he gets that. Now, if they are wise, they will reconcile these interests. If they are not wise, then they go to courts and a case takes place.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yes, sir.
So among countries, there is no friendship. There is the pursuit of interest. We've got used the word friendship, we use the word affinity, all the rest is used. But countries seek to protect their interests. Even while helping others, you are seeking to protect your interests. There is, even though there's great talk of altruism and that we are helping you and we are doing this, all that is well and good. But at the end of the day, it's interests, and interests differ. So that is why it's important, and wisdom lies through the path of reconciling those interests.
Understood, sir. Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Katju, I'm interrupting, but there is something that, as an educator, you
Yeah.
can understand where I'm coming from.
Ma'am. Okay.
For years together, there was this after the First World War, Berlin Wall, East Germany, West Germany. But even then, when I was a kid, and today as an educator, a non-history person, I still think that maybe someday the boundary walls between India and Pakistan may come down and we might become one nation because culturally we are so similar. It's just the other side. I mean, if I see them, I go to the border, I see them. I've met some Pakistanis in the UK. They are so like us. And when I've gone to France or I've gone to UK or any place I've traveled, when a Pakistani person meets me, he'll always say, "Wow, you're from India. Aajao, have food with me. Come to my restaurant." And I go there. I eat. They come to Indian restaurants, and there is so much of camaraderie. But is this all only political, or someday culturally we can become one again? I mean, I live with that hope.
No, I think I dealt with, since you mentioned Pakistan, and I dealt with Pakistan a lot of, for a long period in my professional life. You are right. We, at one level, India, Pakistan, all humanity, we share a common humanity. And within India and Pakistan, there were certain cultural traditions that were in common. But then Pakistan in 1947 before that too, the Muslim League uh, decided that religion was the most important element in nationalism. And that is why they said that uh, India, Hindus and Muslims were two separate nations, not two separate religious communities, two separate nations. And they could not live together. That is why they said we want a separate country where Muslims will be in a majority and where Muslim law will take place. Will So they decided to go on a different path, and they pursued that path. That is their trajectory. On the other hand, we said that religion is only one of the things. It's a private affair. The state has no business to interfere in religion. And all persons are equal, whatever be their religious faith. So we decided to follow a different constitutional path. So when you meet Pakistanis at a cultural level, of course, as a diplomat, I had great friendship with some Pakistani diplomats. We get on, we got on very well. A lot of, because after all, there's so much in common. The language was common, especially for a person like me who comes from the north. We spoke Hindustani. They spoke a little Urdu. They had more Persian and Arabic words, and my Hindustani was different, but we spoke a common language, and we shared cultural traditions. We liked the same kind of music, same, the whole works, as you said, and the hospitality traditions, how khana khao, beto, chai pio, so many. But when it came to political issues, when it came to ideological things, matters, then the differences became apparent. So when it came to their interests, then the bonhomie that was there on both sides started disappearing and a hardening of position started. Because they followed their own interests and their own ideologies. We followed our own interests and our own ideology. So I too, like you, would very much hope that one day there'll be peace and goodwill among all men, and that is what we all and women, of course, that humankind
Yeah.
will prosper and there will be unity. But unfortunately, historical experience is not does not point in that direction.
But I was just thinking with all this talk of globalization, with traveling so much, with cultures being exchanged, as an educator, I'm still hoping that the youngsters will learn from our lessons. And there will be one world where humanity reigns supreme.
I
And the
I
politics don't matter.
I could not agree with you more. I'm an old person. I'm over 70. And what can I want for children and grandchildren than that they should be happy and there should be no conflicts and the whole world should be able to live in peace and amity and prosperity and naturally with emotion, that is the natural human emotion. We all want that. What I was trying to convey today in this 1 hour that we've discussed, is that while we should all aspire, and especially the young, should always have positive aspirations, and they should look at things positively and be hopeful. They should never forget realism.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
We are honored to have you, and I'm sure they've learned a lot. And all the youngsters who will watch it, because this will be shared with the rest of the student body. Would be a great experience.
I don't know whether it was of any help, but I enjoyed talking to you. Thank you.